What's up guys, Ibra here with hardwarecanucks, and guess what? Fujifilm decided to send me $10,000 worth of camera gear. I repeat, 10 grand worth of camera gear. So I've got two Fujinon lenses over here, and I also have this Fujifilm X-H1 mirrorless body. So, let's check it out. Alright, so you can clearly tell that this stuff isn't geared towards the average consumer. In fact, Fujifilm is targeting the setup for cinematographers who are looking for a hybrid solution where they can take advantage of a digital cinema style glass paired with a pretty compact body. And this looks certainly interesting, definitely unique if you ask me, because I'm typically used to seeing cameras like Red and RE paired up with this type of glass. But being able to have that mounted on a mirrorless setup is definitely fascinating, and I'm approaching this video as a newbie because I'm pretty new to this stuff. I haven't played around with prime or zoom lenses in the first place, specifically lenses that cost so much. So this is like a first-time experience, and this is by no means a full dedicated review. I'm not the person for that, but I'm just gonna be sharing my experience using a setup like this, especially since these are some of the opportunities that you get, and definitely it's also something that I'd love to share with you guys. So let's talk about Fujifilm and this whole 10 grand setup. Alright, so what do we have here? Well, let's kick things off with the body. This is the X-H1, Fujifilm's flagship mirrorless camera, and it features a 24.3 megapixel APS-C size X-Transmo CMOS 3 sensor, which is actually the exact same one found on their X-T2 camera that costs a lot less than the X-H1. Coming to think of it, the X-H1 is pretty much identical to the X-T2 in terms of the physical design. You get the same physical dials to adjust the ISO and shutter speed. You also get the same dual SD card slots for flexible recordings. The exposure compensation dial has been replaced by the 1.28-inch LCD ink display that shows the main settings like battery status, the f-stop, shutter speed, and white balance, and all the other kind of stuff. It's certainly a welcoming addition over the X-T2, but more specifically, I think it's a unique implementation on a camera body in the first place, because I personally don't or can't recall any camera bodies that are currently in the market that feature an ink display, and this by itself is pretty unique because it's a great way to check battery status if you're in the middle of a shoot, and if you just want to make sure that you have enough battery, you can just quickly grab the camera, look at it, and you can judge whether or not if you have the battery life instead of having to turn on and turn off the camera. So it's certainly one step away. Again, little details that create a whole seamless experience using the camera. Some other features that I want to point out is that this camera now comes with 5-axis image stabilization, which the X-T2 didn't come with, so that's definitely an awesome upgrade. But I also want to talk about the electronic viewfinder on the X-H1. Now, if you recall watching my X-T2 review, I had great things to talk about the electronic viewfinder, and I have the exact same say for this setup because it's by far the best experience using it, especially when composing shots outside in direct sunlight and when the screen doesn't really get that bright. The viewfinder is the way to go, and again, having that electronic viewfinder, it's super sharp and crystal clear. It's very bright as well. But there's also one thing that really boggles me with the release of the X-H1, because if you think about it, when the X-T2 came out, I had a few concerns with this internal recording capabilities. For instance, it was not able to shoot any slow motion, but at the same time, it didn't have the capability to shoot F-log, which is Fujifilm's flat profile internally on the X-T2. And when Fujifilm released the X-H1, this camera sort of addressed all of that by including slow motion capabilities and internal F-log recording. What's really odd is that Fujifilm rolled out a firmware update to the X-T2 that added all of the concerns that I had for that camera. So now you actually could pick up the X-T2, update the firmware, and you can now get the ability to shoot F-log internally, plus also you get the whole slow motion capabilities as well. So it really comes down to, which camera really perfects, or which is probably the best pick if you're choosing between the X-T2 and the X-H1. Because I feel like Fujifilm is competing within themselves with the release of the X-H1 and now with the updated X-T2 with just the firmware thing. So it's kind of confusing. I'm kind of left in this spot where I really can't recommend which one should I go with. If I were you, I mean, I would probably go with the X-T2 because it's a lot more cheaper, and if you update the firmware, you're looking at a pretty solid camera that can compete identical to the X-H1. Moving on to accessories, and there's this, the vertical power booster grip. And if you recall watching my X-T2 review, I had great things to talk about that accessory. In fact, it's a must-have accessory for a Fujifilm camera. I have the same thing to say for the X-H1, because this thing can hold up to 2 batteries, so you can shoot for longer periods of time without worrying about battery life. It also improvises the ergonomics, especially for shooting portraits, because you can control the shutter speed and the aperture, along with a few more functions when you've oriented the body vertically. You also get extra features like a headphone jack for monitoring audio, extended 4K recording to approximately 30 minutes, and a boost mode that improves burst shot performance. Now, before we get into the MKX lenses, I just want to quickly go over my thoughts on f-log. I did do a few comparisons between the X-H1 and the C100 to see if there was a difference in dynamic range, and quite frankly, there was. In fact, the highlight recovery with the Fujifilm color profile is actually a lot better compared to the C100, and that also makes a lot more sense because the internal recording bitrate is actually a lot higher compared to the C100. And I also love the colors coming out of this Fujifilm camera too. I mean, looking by these samples, you can definitely tell that Fujifilm is really a solid camera when it comes to displaying or just outputting great colors. And if you spend some time tweaking and tuning the grade, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get some amazing results with the X-H1. And lastly, let's talk about the exciting stuff, which is the Fujinon MKX lenses. So this is the 18 to 35mm T2.9 Cine lens. And for those of you who are wondering what T2.9 stands for, it's essentially the actual tested value for the aperture compared to the theoretical value with some of the photography lenses. So for instance, the Sigma 18 to 35mm lens comes with an f1.8 aperture, which is the theoretical value. But in some cases, I would have to compensate for the exposure, in post, some cases. But the reason why, a lot of these cinema lenses have the T rating or the T reading is for the fact that they're more accurate. So if you are shooting on multiple exposure levels, you know for a fact that you're shooting with an accurate aperture control, and that's why they sort of refer to this as the T stop compared to an f stop. So that's something to consider. And of course, implementing T readings, especially with photography lenses, is definitely expensive. I'll actually leave a link to an article that actually describes the whole differences between f-stop and t-stops really well. So if you're interested in reading that, definitely make sure to check it out. So this lens is geared to deliver the best optical performance and comfortable operability in professional film environments. It's a complete manual lens, meaning you as the user would have to adjust the aperture, focusing, and the range. And no, it does not come with autofocusing capabilities, so it's not really ideal for photography. But I've got to admit, the build quality of this lens is outstanding. The whole body is constructed out of metal and aluminum materials. It's also a heavy glass weighing a little over 1,000 grams, which isn't too bad since mounting it with a compact mirrorless body makes it this ideal for typical run-and-gun situations. The weight balance is good, especially when you mount this lens on the tripod with the included bracket, and overall it was a really comfortable experience shooting with this system. I should also mention that the other 50 to 135mm lens weighs exactly the same as the 18 to 35mm lens. So if you were in a run-and-gun situation, if you had this set up on a gimbal and if you wanted to swap lenses, you can easily do that without having to recalibrate your gimbal setup, and I think that's pretty cool. And all of this translates to its hefty price tag of $4,300 US per lens. And to give you a little bit of context, you can actually pick up the Sony a7 III mirrorless camera with the 24 to 70mm f2.8 GM lens for the exact same cost. So for those of them who are actually getting into these lenses, know exactly what they're looking for in the first place. And I think pricing is more of a secondary concern, because at the end of the day, all they want is a system that works flawlessly, something that they can rely on, and these lenses do exactly that. Now, that being said, there are some key advantages opting for a cine-style lens instead of a traditional photography lens. So one of them is obviously the physical aspect, which I talked about earlier, but there's also the 3 manual rings that feature gear pitches that allow the use of third-party accessories like adding a follow focus. So for instance, if you are working in a film environment where you have someone that's actually pulling focus for you, but you're just behind the camera composing and making sure everything is in perfect composition, you can actually mark certain levels within the focusing range, and you can just make sure you can tape that particular portion, and you can have your second camera operator, he can make sure that he's right in focus just when he switches from the foreground to the background or something like that, where he doesn't have to miss that particular mark. So that's one of the advantages of playing around or just using cinema glass in the first place, is just giving that extra flexibility, especially when you have someone else taking control of the focus ring. I should also mention how smooth and satisfying these manual rings are when it comes to pulling focus or even zooming into a subject. There is no resistance whatsoever, and it's far superior to my Sigma 18 to 35mm 55mm lens, and the end results are pretty amazing. There are also things like suppress focus shift while zooming, and this essentially eliminates the need to refocus a subject after zooming in and out. So for example, if I'm shooting someone for client work, and if I'm literally trying to focus or zoom into that subject while recording, I wouldn't have to punch in and make sure that the subject is in focus, because that could disturb or that could introduce camera shakes within the video, and that's something that I don't want to compromise on, especially if I'm working for a client. I want to make sure everything's consistent and clear, and that's, again, it's a minute detail, but at the end of the day, it really creates a big difference, especially when it comes to your final delivery, because your whole story is basically consistent, and that's, again, a pretty cool advantage when it comes to shooting with these cinema glasses. And lastly, there is suppress lens breathing, and this feature maintains a consistent angle of view while shifting focus, especially from the foreground to the subject. And this is a pretty cool addition. In fact, it's probably one of the first things that I realized when playing around with the cinema lens, because normally when I am trying to focus from a subject or from a foreground to subject, I do notice breathing with my normal Sigma lens, but it's something that I was not able to notice with the digital lens or the cinema lens. So it makes a lot more sense, especially when you're composing or if you're working, again, in short films. These are just minute things that just add on to the whole experience when it comes to shooting or just sitting behind the camera and making sure that your composition is well tacked. So having talked about some of the features that the MKX series lenses offer compared to a standard photography lens, especially for, cinematographers, how is it like actually for YouTube? To be honest, it's not ideal for me personally, and let me explain to you why. All right, so here's a more realistic scenario where if I'm taking a close-up shot of this logo on this headset. So I have this camera positioned at this angle, and I really want to go in. So I'm literally at 55mm right now, but as you can see, the lens actually has a pretty difficult time trying to focus, and that's because the minimum focusing distance on this lens is actually a lot higher compared to the Sigma. So we're talking 85 centimeters, which is the minimum focusing distance, compared to 30 or about 30 centimeters with the Sigma lens. So, from a flexibility standpoint, I like to move the camera around at different angles, and I like to shoot at certain positions. So, this setup wouldn't be ideal because I would obviously have to compensate for that by moving the camera a little bit behind, which isn't too bad. But again, it's that one extra step that I have to do, which I don't have to with this setup over here, because again, the minimum focusing distance on the Sigma lens is a lot shorter, and of course, therefore, it just helps my workflow a lot easier. So what I'm going to do right now is just roll some of the footage that I shot with this camera, and you guys can tell for yourself what the quality looks like, especially with this camera shooting in 4K at 30 frames per second. I also did shoot with the f-log profile, and I did spend some time color grading it. So definitely let me know what you guys think about the results in the comments down below.
Treat your ears with the incredibly comfortable HD58X Jubilee headphones from Massdrop and Sennheiser, delivering sound expected from $500 headphones, but only for $150, making it one of the best price to performance skins available. Check out and join the drop down below.
Well guys, that pretty much concludes my experience using 10 grand worth of gear from Fujifilm. Now let me be honest with you guys. This stuff or this setup isn't geared towards everyone out there. It's really geared towards a specific workflow. Certainly not for me because, as a YouTuber, specifically for someone who shoots tech videos, I like the flexibility of having the Sigma lens with the C100 because I can go in and shoot macro shots and do all kinds of stuff. which I necessarily won't be able to do with this setup. It's really geared towards documentary filmmakers, you know, someone who doesn't want to compromise on things like lens breathing and of course being able to get that consistent optical focusing while zooming in without losing focus. So those are the little things, and of course the build quality and the reliability that you get with some of these lenses. Those are some of the things that makes this lens sort of stand out from the traditional photography lenses that are out there in the market. So this isn't a full review. I wouldn't treat this as a full review by any means. This is again me scratching the surface. I'm a noob at this when it comes to testing this stuff. So I definitely had a lot of fun testing out this setup, and I can't wait to see what Fujifilm has planned out for the future with their mirrorless and their cinema style glass, and how they can sort of work hand in hand, and what they have planned out for future filmmakers. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe for more similar content. In fact, don't forget to check out our new Boot Sequence channel for the latest tech news and rumors. And you can also check out some relevant content over here. I'm Igor with Hardware Canucks. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.